Thank you for inviting me. I'm so glad that I'm speaking one day before the Halloween, because my story is more a story about horrors. I came to the United States 36 years ago, and during this time, can you hear me now?
Yeah!
I came to the United States 36 years ago, and during this time I have often been asked, why did I leave Soviet Union? The first thing was fear. I was born in Latvia, one of the 3 Baltic republics that was annexed by the Soviet Union as a result of Stalin-Hitler non-aggression agreement that was signed in 1939. One of my first childhood memories is sitting with my family at the kitchen table in the middle of night. The window covered with thick blanket, the room illuminated by a single candle. We were listening. We lived on the 4th floor of our apartment building. I remember the rumble of the heavy trucks passing by. I could feel the fear spreading through the room. Suddenly, unmistakably, a truck stopped in front of our apartment building. My grandmother asked that we hug and kiss each other, as this may be the last time we would be together. I heard the heavy boots in the entrance hall. We all counted the steps. They stopped on the 2nd floor landing. I remember the fists banging on the door. They had come for someone, but whom? A few minutes later, the soldiers left with my neighbor, Victoria, another victim. She never returned, but that night, I and my family were spared. The Soviets had done that before, in 1941. In that year, in one night, they arrested 15,000 people, put them in railroad, box, train, whatever, and exiled to Siberia. 7 years later, my cousin Irene joined them. So you would ask, what was their crime? Their crime was that they were middle class. They were not communist collaborators. Before the war, they were the productive, thinking, assertive citizens, the small business owners, the land-owning farmers. The regime leaders saw to it that the wicked middle-class members get a new job in slave camps, better known as the Gulag, where they were building factories and highways, mining gold or uranium, or digging canals, surviving maybe on a piece of bread or a single potato. 62 million of them perished. 62 million. Understand this. All totalitarian governments are based in terror and cruelty. The party bosses had stated to their minions, and I paraphrase Lenin's directive, we are exterminating the bourgeoisie as a class. In your investigations, there is no need to look for documents and pieces of evidence that the defendant has done, whether in deed or in speech against Soviet authority. The only questions you need ask are, from what class you come, what are your roots, your education, what's your training, what's your occupation. These questions define the fate of the accused. The second reason I left the USSR was the relentless brainwashing to which I was subjected. Most note exile became obedient as well as fearful. We were conditioned to behave like captive animals. I just heard Sarah Palin use a term, sheeple. Sheeple plus people makes sheeple. We lived in assigned apartments, in assigned communities. We waited for the medical care in assigned clinics and assigned hospitals. Day in and day out, people were fed and most consumed the party propaganda. We spoke politically correct language. We could not trust our neighbors, our colleagues, or even friends. They could betray us. The politically correct answers were in the patriotic songs, patriotic films, in the rewritten history that praised the greatness of Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin. Schools were the appropriate place to produce the new robots or sheeples. No dissent was tolerated. In school, we were brainwashed as to the superiority of the Soviet system, where everybody was equal and everything was fair, where even a brighter future of communism was on the horizon. We had to sing songs about Lenin and Stalin, the father of all peoples and nations. I was taught that it was they who provided me with everything, including food and clothing, not my parents. The Communist Party knew best. According to Friedrich Engels' writing on false consciousness, later used by Marxists, he stated that the working class did not understand what's in their best interests. Only government did. We, the sheeple, falsely believed that we needed more food in the grocery stores and better living conditions. But government knew that spreading socialism around the globe was a priority. While money was spent to support communist parties and revolutions around the world, my parents worked for a miserable government-determined salary, only to have to spend their after hours hunting for food and necessities in nearly empty stores. Imagine how hurtful it was to them to see me grow up under these conditions, they who had been free only decades earlier. Now in America, I hear children singing the praise of their leader. Teachers are telling pupils that their parents don't understand them, that they are outdated and not progressive enough. False consciousness. Our children are told to instruct their parents about global warming, pollution, and poor polar bears. Our schools are undermining parental authority. This makes me bristle. Talk to your children, educate them about world events and politics. Don't allow them to become sheeple. My parents did not. There was Voice of America, and my stepfather tuned into it as often as possible. We all listened, though it was jammed. We heard the truth, but I was instructed never to talk about it outside, because there could be reprisals in a form of conversation with KGB, asylum, prison, or even Siberia. The third lesson or reason I left was because of hopelessness of my situation. At age 16, I realized there was nothing wrong with me and plenty wrong with the country. Now entered the communist promise of social justice and equality. Here is brainwashing for you. For some elites, it was good as they received the real property and the belongings of the enemies of the state. This ruling class included party bosses, favored artists, and complicit journalists and propaganda moguls. They had access to special stores, special hospitals, apartments, and the famous dachas. They were the only ones who were allowed to travel. But even these privileged people lived in fear. One wrong move, and they were out. This redistribution of wealth for equality's sake only made everybody equally poor and poorly treated. For example, we suffered with inferior and sanitary and low-tech medical equipment. There was a lack of medication and accommodation. For example, the only birth control method used was abortion, performed without anesthesia. I myself had a root canal performed without anesthesia. Due to the intense pain, I became to scream, so I was ordered out of the office until I could compose myself. No crying was allowed. On another occasion, I suffered a miscarriage. Again, I was without any painkillers. Later that night, while in my office hospital bed, surrounded by 18 other sick women, I began to sob for the loss of my twins. A nurse quickly scolded me for disturbing others. In my opinion, the Soviet government-controlled healthcare program succeeded only in destroying human dignity. Is it any wonder that our senators and congressmen excluded themselves from Obamacare? On the housing front, a communal apartment with one bathroom and one kitchen sometimes housed 3 to 4 families. Happily, one could get in line for a larger apartment if the old space offered 70 square feet or less per person. It took my family 14 years to receive our new apartment, but only 12 years to get a new telephone. This utopia of equality, all in the name of the collective good, led only to anger, envy, alcoholism, blackmail, corruption, and black markets. I could go on, but I think you get the picture. We Americans still have the power to avert such a situation as that in which I grew up. All that is necessary is for us to be politically engaged and aware. Vote.